to another episode of What Are You Selling? With me today is the awesome writer of fantasy horror, would be the best way to describe it, dark fantasy horror, Lee C Conley. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So, like I've read your first, but I've not read the second one yet. It's on my Kindle. It's ready to go. Or it's on my list of things to read, or should I say the ever growing list of things to read. But I enjoyed Ritual Bones so much that like I just can't wait to get into the second one. So for people that don't know you, that's looking for, I assume that most people would. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit how you got into writing, and you know the fantasy series in general. Like what was it that brought you into that?
Okay, well, I'm Lee. Live in Lincoln in the UK, as you can probably tell by my accent, in case there's any Americans watching. I'm actually a musician by day. I play guitar professionally and teach a lot and do a lot of sound, things like that. I'm also a swordsman as well. I teach longsword, medieval longsword. So how did I get into the writing? Well, I actually wrote a guitar book first, which I usually have a copy of, but I don't have a copy of. I usually have wrote a guitar book as an advanced guitar theory textbook. And then as I was writing that, I really got into just the idea of writing. It was a self-published one. And I just really wanted to publish something else. And I was working on a horror at the time, which was then to become The Ritual of Bone eventually. And I just kept writing. After I finished it, I just kept writing, but it was prose instead of musical formula. It was quite a fun experience. And it's a big learning curve. Obviously, I'd self-published it to start with, and I've had to go through all the trials and tribulations of self-publishing, learning how it actually works, learning the industry, because obviously the music industry and the writing industry are much different. So I didn't have many relatable skills, but certainly picking it up. So it's been good. How did I get into horror and fantasy? I did it completely by accident. Completely by accident. I thought everyone did it, or it was a well done thing, but apparently it's done, but not overly. I decided to write a horror novel. I love my zombies and I love horror films and things like that. So I wanted to write a really cinematic horror. But I pretty much exclusively read fantasy. Like my first book I remember reading was The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and I've read them like 3 times before I was 10, and all the David Eddings and things like that. And then more recently, Mazalan's been a huge influence on me. Stephen King's a big influence on me as well. Dark Tower, I think, is my favorite work of his, which is controversial because a lot of people don't like it, but I think it's absolutely amazing. And I just started writing this horror novel. It's very much a horror. It's very much in the horror style, but it just happens to be set in a fantasy world.
Yeah.
And I think I was watching a lot of Vikings at the time, and it just came out in this Last Kingdom. It was very Viking Norse. It's supposed to be almost like a Saxon sort of vibe to it, but a lot of people have picked it up as Norse. So I've ran with that and said, yeah, it's a Norse man. It's not really Norse. It's kind of Norse inspired. They have long ships and axes and round shields, but that's pretty much where it ends. But yeah, it's very much an early medieval Iron Age sort of setting, but fantasy. And there's zombies, and they try and kill everyone. And it's quite fun.
As they do, zombies do love to kill people. It's just what they do. They can't
absolutely.
It's interesting that it started off as like you came from it from the angle of horror first. So I was actually going to ask you that because like it is. I mean, it's very horrific in a lot of places. I mean,
thank you.
But like, yeah, it's interesting that it started off as the horror angle first. That was the first thing that you went to write about that, because you can kind of sometimes, and that's what I thought was gonna be the case, because the horror isn't diluted in it. Where I think sometimes when you come up the other way, where it's like fantasy or something, and they just add horror, the horror you can tell that it's
absolutely.
So you've got two. I mean, the second book it came out just before Christmas, didn't it? Ritual,
right.
And it just came out on audio.
That's right, about a month and a half ago, I think it was.
Yeah. So what's the process of that? So I mean, if people have got any audiobook credits or anything, like the two are both available now. So how did you go about kind of getting that recorded? Did someone approach you, or did you approach them? Or
well, I didn't realize I was fairly new to the industry. I've only been writing and selling my books for about 5 years. But one of my good writer friends, Jacob Sannox, got in touch and said, "Have you been onto ACX yet with your book? You read Ritual Bone." He was like, he loved it, and he was like, "You need to make this made into an audiobook." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know how to do that." So I went onto ACX, had a look. It looked like you needed about £2,000 to pay an audio producer to do it. I was like, I just can't afford that. But then ACX have this royalty share business where you can approach different narrators, or they can approach you, and you can split the royalties, and there's all these different things you can do, which makes it much more affordable to do. So I was like, this actually might be quite good. And a few of my other friends, bloggers and things like that have mentioned that they all seem to prefer a lot of audiobooks. So I thought there's definitely a good market for that. And I can tell you, as far as the selling element of your podcast goes, there is definitely a great market in audiobooks. Right. So definitely get your books on audiobook. ACX is great. It does end up being Amazon exclusive usually, but still very much worth it. And I actually hit the jackpot as well. I was just I tried out a few different guys. I got a couple of good auditions through. They were okay. And then there's another writer in the circuit, Stephen McKinnon, lovely chap, Scottish chap. I looked at one of the narrators from who he didn't actually use for his book. It was an audio sample, so Symphony of the Wind. I was like, click on that because Stevie's great. And I had to listen. And the narrator was Rob Bailey, RJ Bailey, who is my current audiobook narrator. And he was absolutely blew me away. I really liked him. So I got in touch. He usually charges and things, but I got talking to him about it, and he ended up doing this, getting the contract sorted with me, and we went with it. And he did a blinding job with Ritual Bone. And then he was really excited to come back, and he wouldn't let me get anyone else. He wanted to do Ritual of Flesh, which was a real honor. And he's done an amazing job on that one as well. Ritual of Flesh, I know you haven't read it yet, but Ritual of Flesh is a little bit more heavy on the voice acting. There's a lot more variety of characters, and there's a lot of this. When you read it, there's an interesting character who like whispers a lot, and we had to go through that with him. And but yeah, in the end, he absolutely nailed it. With I think he dubbed it his Sith Ghost Whisper, which is perfect. As soon as he did it, I was like, that's it, that's the one, do that. But yeah, it's quite a fairly easy process. Just I think there's other audiobook companies that do it, but I use ACX and very much would recommend them. They're good.
And were you like, obviously you were heavily involved with like listening to, would he like record like a character and send it over to you and say, and you'd be like, not quite what I was thinking, or?
Sort of. I gave him, especially worked in the music industry. If you just give someone a little brief and send them off to do something, what you get back isn't usually what you're after. And I assumed it would be the same with this, so I gave him a very detailed brief. I actually listed every character, almost like a dramatis personae, and detailed notes on pretty much all the characters and then suggestions. So I gave him a bit of free rein. I wanted a Cornish accent. And a lot of my family are from Devon and Cornwall. We've got a big West Country thing going. I don't have the accent, sadly, but I wanted a little bit of that. A lot of it's very much Yorkshire-based, Scottish, a little bit of Irish. But I really wanted some West Country accents in there as well. And one of my favorite characters in the series, Hafgan, has this absolutely fantastic West Country accent, which absolutely nailed. He nailed it exactly. It's like he took it out of my mind and gave it to him. But yeah, so big detailed brief, and he'd record a few things, samples, things like that, send them over. I'd okay them, then he'd go ahead and do it, and then I'd check it all at the end to make sure something. Every now and again, there's like the odd mispronunciation, there was an issue with one of the edits where I didn't edit something in the right. He had the wrong one, so he had to go back and do a few things and change a few sentences. But he was very flexible, absolutely fantastic, very professional to work with. Great chap as well. But yeah, and I listened to everything everything came back. I listened to the whole thing, just in awe. Wow, what's this I'm listening to? This is, it's like my words, but with someone else's voice. It's an absolute, it's really cool. And now it's out. So
yeah, it's out. Yeah, I mean, I have like so many credits on Audible, just building up, because anytime I try and listen to him, like my son is kind of like, what's going? He just decides that's the time where he's like, just needs questions and answers about things. It's like, well, I need to start getting into them. I do like, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and then I listen to the audiobooks of Star Wars because they have like the whole sound effects and the scores and everything like that. It's amazing. I almost crashed my car once because I was listening to one. I was just so like enveloped in this like this story. I was like, whoa, where the hell am I? But that's great. So Also, as well, your accents you just talk about there. So I noticed that you say Cornish, Yorkshire, West Country, Scottish, and Irish. What about Mancunian? You need to get
I've
the
got nothing
Mancunian.
against a bit of Mancunian. It's like, I was going for, it's a little bit tropey, but I was going for your standard fantasy accents that are quite often used in film. As I say, I wanted a very cinematic approach. When you watch Lord of the Rings, which is, in my opinion, the best example of a fantasy film from book turned into film.
Yeah.
It is this Cornish, West Country vibe, and again, I mentioned Vikings earlier. The whole Norse sort of Nordic accent that they put on in that, which is, I don't know what accent that is. It's just become the new Viking accent. I'm not sure even if that is a real accent, but yeah, that whole sort of vibe. But yeah, I'll speak to Rob and we'll see if we can get some Mancunian put in there.
Just even one. I'm petitioning you right now. Like, it's not too different from Yorkshire, so like it's we can do.
Well, I think the northern accents kind of fit the feel of the world in my world a little bit better. I mean, I live up in Lincoln, which is, we think of it as the north, but most people don't think of us as the north. They think we're a bit posh or something. But we're just as north as Manchester.
People from up north, as for me, we think anywhere below Birmingham is the south. So that's it.
Well, that's okay. But
yes,
I was generally going for a wide variety of northern accents, a little bit of Celtic. So there's a very, very Celtic feel to the series. A bit of Scottish now, but I didn't want to mix it up too much because otherwise it just sounded a bit jarring. I want everyone to have the same sort of national accent, which is regional variations. But say he's got such a big cast, I think he runs out of accents to use. So he's got to get creative and put a little.
I mean, the world building in it is amazing. Like the world building is fantastic, and so it's great to hear you talk about how much thought you've gone into like accents and that sort of stuff, because even when you're reading it, that comes through from the text, the kind of care and thought that you've put into that. So like, and I suppose that's what kind of differentiates between horror and the fantasy angle as well, is because obviously, like, not to say there's not world building in horror, there is, but not to the extent that there is in fantasy. So, like, what is it about the two? I know from the horror aspects, I was going to say, what are your favorite aspects of the two genres? I know one of them is going to be zombies. Well, what's so, like, from the fantasy side of things, like, what's you mentioned like Lord of the Rings and Alazan, which are like huge examples of tremendous world building. But what kind of things do you enjoy with the fantasy genre?
Well, as far as the fantasy goes, I try to approach my style of fantasy I don't really have much magic. There's not much of the fantastic in my fantasy. It's much more of like a alternative, almost like history almost. It's like I try to keep it very true to history, and I study a lot of history. I always have. Obviously with my sword stuff, we have to read through a lot of old treatises and almost embrace the old style of living. Even to things like how people walk, how the shoes they would wear and how that would affect how they walk, would affect how you use a sword, things like that. So big into my history, and I wanted to sort of recreate my own version of a sort of dark age, early medieval world, chainmail and long ships and round shields and things like that. So a lot of it I took from history. A lot of the culture comes out of the sort of a pagan Celtic vibe as well. And again, I study a lot of Celtic folklore, and we have a lot of the pagan Celtic sort of vibe going on in our house. So I want to bring a lot of that into there as well. But yeah, and then that's one thing I loved about Lord of the Rings, things like Rohan and Gondor. I mean, Rohan in particular, they really captured the sort of, if I was going to put if Arnar was in Lord of the Rings, it would be Rohan, if you see, without the horses, that feel and the armor style and everything. So it's very much a historical influence. Obviously, I can play with things because it's my fantasy. I can do what I like. I can put any culture from wherever and mix and match. But I generally try and keep it quite almost like a alternate history realism in a fantasy, in a made-up world. But you'll notice there isn't very much by the way of magic or fantastic creatures or anything like that. I try and keep it quite low fantasy, little tiny snippets of things. But the horror thing is where it really comes in. I mean, I watch a lot of horror films, and one of the things I wanted to do when I started writing all my little short stories over the years was I found it really hard to write something scary. My wife reads a lot of horror as well, and she's like, no, none of these books are actually scary. And it got me thinking, it's really, really hard to write a book that's actually, scary. Most horror fans, they're impossible to scare, and they read so much or watch so much. And it's the same on film. To capture something actually scary, so I had to delve into what makes people tick. What makes me scared. So I was, being in the dark on my own in the woods. So, but it's this. You'll notice a big theme in a ritual, but it's a theme throughout the whole series. Someone watching you. That freaks you out, doesn't it? Like the thought of house on your own at night, and you're like, I hope someone isn't looking through the window at me. And you just start freaking yourself out. But there's not some. You walk up the stairs and you think, what if I see someone standing at the top of the stairs? And it's like you're almost afraid to look sometimes. You know what I mean?
It's like when you're on your own, you're in bed, and like you just think you've heard something, and instead of actually doing something about it, you just freeze and you just become completely still. And it's like this: exactly. If there is someone there, they're going to be really scared of me just being frozen in bed and not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like that. You look in the corner and there's like a darkness,
Yeah.
And you almost like start to see something. Almost like manifests out of nothingness. Yes. And so I've tried to tap into that with the horror side of things. So there's a lot of there's like a possession element, which you'll start to see a lot more of in Ritual of Flesh and the preceding books, books that go after it. Sorry, been a long day. But so possession and monsters. The monster thing was fun. I love zombies. I love the Romero stuff. I love the Walking Dead, things like that. And Evil Dead as well is probably my favorite. In fact, I wanted to get this evil presence vibe that watches you and makes zombies. So I'm almost very evil. I owe the Evil Dead that a lot. But one of the questions that came up when I was planning everything, and I started writing some things where they ran at you and chased you, and then some things where they walk at you, and I was like, I need to think of a device that separates these two different kinds of creature. So in the Dead Sagas, obviously one of them isn't actually dead. It's just like a crazy, bestial, nasty monster, and the other one is a dead thing. But they are linked quite cleverly. I won't ruin how, but they are linked. They're very much the same beast, if you see what I mean. Well, just two halves of the same thing. So, but I'd like to put some more scary monsters in there. But again, I don't want to move too far away from the low fantasy realism, so I'm gonna have to make it work. But we'll see. I've got some plans, so we'll see.
Let's talk zombies. Obviously, they've come up a few times. You love them, and you can see it in the work. I watched Army of the Dead last night. Have you seen it yet?
I have seen it. Yes.
What do you think of it?
I actually really enjoyed it. I've seen a few people not really enjoying it, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I thought there was a little bit of a great minds think alike sort of vibe when I was watching it. I was like, I hope everyone doesn't think I've stole this off that. I was like, just make sure you realise my book came out 4 years before this was made. But there's the whole running thing, the more, the alpha ones, and then there's the walking ones. And I really like that element. And it's nice to see that element coming through in other things, because that means that I've almost hit the right nail on the head, if you see what I mean. Like I'm on the right path. But I really liked it. I think the zombie tiger, genius idea. That's a great idea. I mean, I've got zombie animals, but I haven't got a zombie tiger. That's awesome.
Tiger, Well, I suppose it makes sense. Like, in Vegas, it's just like there's a lot of tigers knocking about. No, it's good. Like, I was watching it last night, and the alpha, like I was kind of thinking, because I was going to come on to talk to you, and I was like, oh, that's a really good extension of that. And obviously, I know that you did it first. So we'll tell them.
Well, they did do it differently. I mean, theirs are still dead. My cursed ones aren't dead. They just come back. You'll see.
Did you catch the robot zombies that were in it as well?
I did. The blue eyes. I kept seeing the blue eyes all over the place, and then there's almost like a metallic under their skin. A few points. I said to my wife, "Hey, robots." I saw the UFOs at the beginning as well, and it's not until I was reading something on one of the websites somewhere. There's the UFO at the beginning. And I was like, I did spot that.
I thought I was making it up. I saw it and zoomed past, and I was like, I'm sure I saw that. But the zombie thing, like there's one, the robot one. There was one near the end in the casino, and it kind of did like a short circuit kind of thing, like a noise. And I said to my wife, and I was like a robot, and she was like, no, it's just like the blue thing that comes out. And I was like, I'm pretty certain there's a robot.
I thought that as well. So it'd be intriguing to see what they do with that. So
because they're building the whole universe. Because there's a prequel out this year, isn't there? And there's going to be sequels and cartoons and all kinds of stuff.
That's cool.
Zombies just never go away, did it? There's always life in them in some kind of way.
Well, I regularly see people on various forums, fantasy and horror forums, saying, "Oh, zombies are dead. They've been overdone over the last 10 years." And I just keep thinking, you're reading the wrong, reading the wrong stuff, because there's plenty of life still in zombies. And I think I like to think I put a little bit of an interesting spin on them as well. I've kept the classic things that everyone loves, but given them a different, concept and idea. So I think it's just a case how you tackle them, isn't it? And how you use them as a device to create terror and fear in action. And that's how you do that. I think that makes it good, rather than the creatures themselves. The creatures are fun to write, though. How gory can I make this particular creature? It's always fun.
It's the same with anything. I mean, even if you take it back to like traditional fantasy, where like people might say, well, elves are overdone or dwarves are overdone, and like in a certain way, then yes, they are, but then just do something different with them, make them your own. Because like I have like in Solitude Shadow, like I have elves in that, but they're kind of like I've taken them to I was kind of thinking, well, if you take like elves from Lord of the Rings, but then strip away all the things that makes them what an elf is, like nature and all this kind of stuff, and take that off them, and then move them somewhere else, what would become of these people? Like sort of very kind of like bitter, twisted, kind of out for themselves kind of thing, because they've had they've been oppressed for so many years, and I think that's kind of different enough for them. And it's the same with how you did it with zombies, and how like Army of the Dead did it. It's just like it's something different and it's something new, and that's fine. That's great to do it, because it's not the same thing all the time. So like, and if it was the same thing all the time, then maybe people would be like, they've had their day. But
I agree completely.
Yeah. So how is the Dead Sagas going? So we've got book 1 and 2 at the moment. The audio book has just come out for book 2. It's going to be five books. Is that?
I think it will be 4 books. I think, but there are going to be more than just 4, because I think there's going to be the main series that follows a particular set of characters over the main core events that happen in the series. But there's loads of scope for other things that happen. So once I've created this world, destroyed it with zombies, then there's like the whole sort of almost like Walking Dead, the series, the TV series element, where different groups stranded in different situations. And I think there's a lot of scope for that. I want to do a standalone about one of the countries next door that's like dealing with it as they come across the border, and there's a few characters that aren't going to be resolved on purpose. They might turn to short stories or standalone novels, but there's going to be a main 4-book series. I'm writing the last 2 books at the same time, so if it turns out that I wrap it up in the right way, it might just be one really long book left, so it might end up being a trilogy. But I'm kind of thinking I might split it into 2 and hopefully release them in short succession. It does mean that it will take a little bit longer to finish, and so the next book you might not see for another year possibly, but it does mean that the 4th book will be out very quickly afterwards, and it lets me finish, tie up everything, make sure I don't want to write the 3rd book and then wish I could go back and put something in it. So I'm going to finish the whole thing. That's the plan. We'll see how it actually pans out, but that's the plan. And if I've got a solid plan and I know exactly what's happening, because there's a big element of mystery. I know what, for example, in the new book, the 3rd book is going to be called A Ritual of Blood, which is, I think, officially the first time I've actually said it in public. So an exclusive.
Exclusive.
But A Ritual of Blood, I know exactly what I want the characters to, where they want them to end up. And I know where they are at the end of Ritual of Flesh, and then there's a few key events that I have planned. In fact, I was writing a couple of scenes today that happen in the middle of the book, and obviously I haven't even got that far yet. I just thought I'm going to jump to that now and do that now, and there's a couple of little bits I want to get done, and then I can work my way backwards or forwards from those scenes. And then, but what happens in between, I actually genuinely don't know. I'll see what happens as I go. So it's almost like there's a plan, but there's also an element of I hate the word pantster, but there's an element of this panstering as well. I think that we should get a better word for just making it up as we go.
Yeah, I heard what I heard recently, discovery writer. I heard that one recently, and garden path writer as well.
I don't even know what to think about that.
So, where can anyone who's watching, where can they find you on the internet? And not your house, but just on the internet.
I actually did give my address to some random person the other week. He was like, "What's your address?" I just sent it to him. I didn't even give a second thought. I just sent it to him. I was like, "Probably shouldn't have done that." So if he turns up, I'll let everyone know. But anyway, I'm quite regularly on social media, so Facebook, Twitter. You can go to my website, which is www.leeconleyauthor.com. Leave me a message on there. I'll get back to you. There's all updates on there. I need to update it, actually. It hasn't been done for a little while, but it will be updated hopefully this week, with news and a blog and things like that on there, reviews and things. But yeah, it'll just drop me a message. My email address is in most of the books, I think. If not, it's on my website, so just drop me an email or social media. So any of the usual channels. I'm quite receptive to messages from strange people, so that's fine.
And I'll have all the links in the comments below. And if it's the first time that you're on this channel, please do us a subscription. Well, subscribe, not a subscription. Subscribe and throw us a like as well. And if you've got any comments or questions for Lee, just ask away as well. I'm sure you'll get around to answering them. So Lee, thanks very much for coming on the show. When the Ritual of Blood is about to come out or is out, you should come back on again, and
It'd be a pleasure.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you very much.